You disappeared.
I did.
Good morning.
I turned my fan off.
Good morning.
Hey, how are you this
Here we
morning?
are, episode number 17.
Boy.
You're looking a little bit brighter and more with it than you were a week ago. So that's
Yeah,
good.
thank you. The drugs are beginning to take effect. So COVID behind me, tested negative a week ago now, and but a full week positive, and then now just getting over the cough and the fatigue, but on the right mend and on the right path, mending up. Thanks.
Good. Well, let's jump right into our.
Yeah, let's do our little weekly intro that we do. I think when I looked earlier, we had some new folks coming in. In fact, if you're joining us today and want to tell us who you are, where you're from, don't hesitate to use those comments. And then certainly, most importantly, as we chat through some of the topics going on in wholesale distribution today, share your thoughts, your ideas, questions, concerns in the comments here, and we'll add those in and bring you into the discussion, which always makes things better. We've noticed the last few weeks, we've got a number of comments after we ended the show that would have been valuable within the broadcast. So bring them on in if you're out there and have some thoughts. But again, here we are, as Tom mentioned, week 17. I'm Kevin Brown. That's Tom Burton. We're the co-founders of LeadSmart Technologies. LeadSmart is a SaaS software solution that helps wholesale distributors and manufacturers and soon-to-be sales agents as well gather the data across their organization that's typically siloed, bring that into a central place where we can have a customer intelligence and CRM solution that brings real results into businesses. So what we've done with this Around the Horn session each week is we sell into a number of marketplaces, into medical distribution, industrial distribution, lots of different types of wholesale markets, including construction supplies and so forth. And so we brought a lot of data from all of those areas and brought that in together here. And we send out this email every Friday morning called Around the Horn, trying to bring all this information about what's happened this week in wholesale distribution. We certainly can never get to all of it, but we try and bring some key things together. So happy to see Brad's joining us this morning from Arizona. We're good to see you there, Brad. And it's been a while since I've gotten to say hello to you. So happy to have you with us. So Tom, why don't we dive in now that we've done a little overview of why we do this and who we are?
Sure. So do you want to get right into the news here?
As we talk about this each week, we try and break things up into two arenas, right? That latest news about kind of what's going on worldwide in the U.S. and North America and the economy within technology as a whole. And then we kind of talk about what's going on in wholesale distribution. But, it's nice to kind of see we've had some jobs added within the manufacturing sector. That's, this has kind of been a good week out there. Stock market's been kind of bouncing back a little bit. We see this announcement about durable goods outpacing things. And I really kind of keyed on this particular article about durable goods because, that's what we're talking about, right? Within our audience of wholesale distributors and manufacturers that make these products. These are the things that keeps America moving, right? Or North America moving, right? We oftentimes, when people ask me about the businesses that I'm in and what we do, as I describe the kind of technology that we make, it's like, you don't think about the hydraulic hose that's attached to the box crusher behind your grocery store, or where, your clothing got made or your car was assembled. You don't think about the conveyor lines and all of those things that go on, but where those durable goods are being produced is really the core of, what keeps this, this world moving. And so it's kind of nice to see that increase in jobs going there and being paced by durable goods, which is what we love to see.
I'm wondering if we had an article last week that I think it was last week where we were talking about the fact that, a lot more manufacturing and activity is coming closer to home.
Yep.
Because of, to avoid all the problems that existed with shipping and supply chain and all of that. I'm wondering if a lot of these jobs are as a result of that they're not so much just people hiring that have already been here, but there's more manufacturing and more these types
Sure.
of
back to the onshoring concept, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't looked at it that way. I did actually kind of perusing the news this week, and I always try and on Thursdays, we both kind of look through things, trying to pull together what we're going to use for this week. But I saw two more articles about both nearshoring and onshoring. So there's certainly no shortage in that trend going on. I'd be interesting if anybody that's with us today or, even down the road watches this recording, which we always have these recordings, they're on YouTube, on our YouTube station. And you call it a station at YouTube? What do you call it?
A channel, but
Channel.
that's okay. That's okay. You know,
that's why you're here. A channel, YouTube channel, Facebook Live. Is where we're at today as well, besides LinkedIn. So we have these recordings here. So if anybody had any thoughts on that or is seeing the idea of reshoring happening, I'd love to get people's thoughts on that. But that should be something we should continue to watch pretty closely and talk about each week. So why don't we kind of jump ahead here?
Yeah. So the second one, I just thought, I think this is really funny, right? It's
I knew you would.
You know, I'm going to caveat this by saying we don't give financial advice on this show. So that's important. But there is a tremendous amount of dollars on the sideline still, right? There's a lot of money that was put in the system, a lot of money that, you know, retail investors and institutional investors are sitting on the sideline with. And it's funny to watch, and this is what I see. It's like you get like the slightest bit of good news, and it's like, oh my God, party time, right? And everybody rushes in. I think I didn't see all the details, but I think they said yesterday like that was one of the biggest gains in 2 years, and there were some other things that were like decade-old sort of records or all of that kind of stuff. And you know, the fact is, right, is the Fed likes to say we're not out of the woods. There's still a lot of runway here that they're going to go through, and other things are going to go through there. I just thought it was funny, the sort of euphoria, I guess you would say, from, which is fine. I mean, it's great that things are moving in the right direction. Don't get me wrong, but just the reaction has been pretty funny. I think there's a little bit more tempering today, but it's just very interesting to watch the process.
I think that's an interesting comment the way you make it, because I was looking at as I was reading this and a couple of other articles, was kind of even looking at a little bit of it from the other side. You know, is we try and always focus on the good things that are happening, right? We try and publish, you know, each week when we do this session, we try and talk about the good things, right? The M&A activity that's going out there, that the world is, you know, and truly in the wholesale distribution world, there has continued to be, while there's some caution, there's continued to be some really good enthusiasm out there to see the ongoing growth and the continuation of things, and not getting hit so hard like, you know, people have been concerned about. Doesn't mean that we're not in for some leaner times and so forth, but you know, we've tried to concentrate on that. And as I was reading this article, I kind of looked at it and said, you know, it's almost like, you know, the Kansas City Fed or the, you know, all these different, the Feds across the, you know, the country. It's like sometimes with this stuff, I feel like they're just looking for a little bit to extend their 15 minutes of fame, because, you know, just this immediate squashing of some good news, right? Okay, so you know what? Inflation didn't grow as much as it was expected to. Let's celebrate that with caution, as opposed to trying to push a damper down on it. And then you get the reverse of that. You get this big push on Wall Street. And it's like, why can't we just find a balance here that says, okay, let's continue to work through this and be optimistic about it, versus one side being so polarized. It's almost like politics earlier in the week, right? Which I'm so glad we stay away from. But there's just this polarizing forces, right? You've got one group of people with all the dry powder you were just describing on the sidelines looking to come in and make some money. And then you've got this other side that's like, whoa, we're not going to let you do that. And
I mean, that's the point, right? The Fed's job is to put the headwind, you know, let's keep the headwind coming, right? Stop spending, reduce all of that, right? Which slows down inflation. But meanwhile, there's still a tremendous amount of dry powder, as you said, on the sideline that is anxiously, right? We've had almost a year of, you know, okay, where am I going to put my money? You know, that kind of stuff. And I think that my point on this is that I think this is something that's not necessarily being discussed and looked at. Is, we can, you know, we can create fear and we can cause people to pull out or slow down spending, but there's still a tremendous amount of cash and money that was created over the last several years that's sitting there, right? That is looking to get into the thing. And so, like I said, I'm not trying to give financial advice, but I think what we're going to see next year, if you continue to see the softening of inflation, you considering to see maybe the worst of it over, you could have a massive rally in the stock market
Yeah.
because of all of this money on the sideline waiting to get in and do something. And, you know, we've all gotten used to, or we did get used to for a few years, these big returns in the market. You know, even 5-6% in a bank account doesn't quite match up to the returns that we got used to getting in the market. So I just think it's a really interesting, it's just interesting to watch. And yeah, you're right. There's definitely two different objectives, but it doesn't change the fact that there's a lot of bucks on the sideline looking for a home. So
trillions of dollars, right?
Yep,
No, you're
yep.
right with that. Well, and then we,
So,
you know, we had the other side of that. We saw the squashing of the, or I guess a continued squashing of the cryptocurrency arena, and with a big bankruptcy there this week. And we're not financial guys, but I know you follow that pretty closely, and I'm glad neither one of us have a lot of money invested in cryptocurrency, I guess. So,
well, yeah, we can have another discussion another day about digital currency. Right.
That's not for here, right?
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to watch, right? What I want to just stay focused on a continual basis is, let's look at the cautious optimism, I'll call it, within wholesale distribution. Good things are happening, right? We're seeing people, our business is growing, people are buying technology. We see people investing in their business on an ongoing basis. We're, you know, coming towards the latter part of show and event season between buying groups and trade associations. It's just been a frenzy, and there's been a good mood. You know, I'm getting ready to go to my ISA event in a couple of weeks. Will be fourth or fifth, either trade association or buying group in the last month and a half. And there is a great optimism there. You're not hearing people like panicking about, I've got to do layoffs like you're hearing in other arenas and industries. So it's nice to hear. And I want to kind of continue to celebrate that with what we do here on Fridays.
Well, and I think again, we could go off on a lot of rabbit holes here, but most of the layoff news you're hearing is from the tech industry,
Yeah.
and predominantly from companies that have been venture funded, right? So they're not making money on profits on their own. They're making, they're being funded by an external source. And when that funding slows down or dries up, right, it's so it doesn't necessarily reflect economy. It reflects the cash capability or your ability to raise cash. That's very different than the economy. So
I think you're right, but I think what we're seeing is a rebound effect from other people that are looking at those things going on and saying, "Ooh, I'm going to cut back on hiring, or I'm going to do this," because we get a rebound off of that.
Sure. And we said this before, right? There's some real healthy activity going on to kind of lean up in certain areas. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you look at the industry that we're talking to, the wholesale distribution, right? This industry is not run off of venture capital. It's run off of real revenue, real profits, real business fundamentals, whereas many tech companies have been running off of, how do I get my next round of funding, right? So very different set of dynamics.
No, you're right. Spot on with that. Well, you know what? I want to kind of segue into talking a little bit about e-commerce, because obviously an important topic. You know, we did a webinar earlier in the week this week with Brian Beck. If you're with us today, if you joined us for the webinar, fantastic. If you're looking or interested in getting that, the link to that, you can put a note in with your email address and a request here into the comments. You can send us a note at hello@leadsmarttech.com. Just a simple email address, hello@leadsmarttech.com, and we'll get you that out. But Brian's a renowned author and speaker on B2B e-commerce. He works with some major brands, both manufacturers and distributors. We did that session with him this week, and we were really working a lot on talking about something that you and I talk about quite regularly. You talk about in your book as well, in the Revenue Zone, about the changing B2B buyer, right? And we know now that, you know, depending on whose research you read, it's either already happened or within the next year or so, you know, well over half of B2B buyers are going to be millennials. And so, you know, those days of, you know, old school days where we went on Tuesdays to bring bagels to XYZ factory or whoever it might be, and it might even be if you're a manufacturer to that distributor you're calling on, that person might have come to work by Uber that day now. And they're different people. And as importantly with that we sometimes forget to talk about is the salespeople that we're getting ready to hire, whether we're a an independent manufacturer's rep or sales agent, you're a distributor, a dealer, or a manufacturer, that sales group of people, the customer service team that we're getting ready to hire, as our business is growing, those people are having different expectations with technology. And we see this article here from Digital Commerce 360, which is just a great resource if you follow these types of things. Huge growth going on now, right? It's commented in this article, right, about digital buying activity. It said that of 40% of companies that they interviewed, at least half of their purchases are being done by e-commerce now. So if we're not fully engaged or working on a plan or a strategy for e-commerce at any level of the wholesale distribution arena that you're at, now is really the time to be doing that. Talked about $11 trillion being done, sold between manufacturers and distributors in North America in the first 9 months of this year. Just astounding amounts of money moving. And if half of purchases by more and more companies are being done by e-commerce, it's time to participate that if you're not in it already.
Yeah, I think the thing that really hit me the hardest from the webinar was really a big eye opener in our conversation with Brian a couple of days ago, was when we were talking about, a lot of this growth in e-commerce isn't cannibalizing existing channels, but it's incremental business.
Right.
And I don't remember the exact stat, but I think he shared that at least half of this is incremental business versus cannibalizing from existing channels. And so, I mean, obviously the incremental business is better, but you talk a lot about what we do in our business, right? As far as aggregating data and then looking at that data, if you are getting more sales from e-commerce and you can harness that data and you can understand who those sales are coming from on those incremental sales, and then be able to tie those back into your more traditional channels in places where you need to provide more of a full service situation. To me, I mean, that you talk about a hot lead, right?
Yep.
That opens up the door to a really, really interesting way of expanding your traditional business by leveraging the information that you're gathering from what you're doing on e-commerce from those incremental buyers, or at least starting to understand, maybe there's certain product categories that they're buying online, certain categories that they're not. Anyway, there's just a lot of insights to be seen from that. And it really hit me when Brian was saying that this isn't about cannibalizing.
Right.
I mean, there is some cannibalizing, but that's not what this is all about.
No, and I think that I'm glad you brought that up, Tom, because it's actually a really good point. And Brian talked about this. He talks about it, I believe, in his book quite a bit as well. But I think it's real interesting, right? Because when we think about the traditional, I'll just say industrial or maybe building supply distributor, they are, my salespeople go to my customer, we have a relationship and they buy from us. Well, that's true. Of course, that's why the business has been able to grow to where it is. But what we're seeing now migrating is that buyer, as he become younger and younger, and even with older ones, as technology grows, they are getting inundated now. And I used the example in discussion with you and Brian on the webinar on Wednesday, was that, it used to be, I'll say even up into probably the early to mid 90s, was that you could probably keep your customer, depending on, what geography you were in, you could probably keep your customer in the dark to the fact that there's 27 different manufacturers of hard hats. He probably knew about the ones that you sold and the ones that your competitors sold. And, maybe he gets a catalog from somebody else out of the state here and there. But, now we've got this, the world is flat, so to speak. We've got a global economy. You can find just about anything that you want on the internet now, and people are using it. And so that mindset for a wholesale distributor that says, hey, I have the contract with the builder of that hospital, I'm going to get all the building supplies. Or I have the contract with that Ford plant or that Tesla plant, so I'm getting most of that business because I have a contract. Those days are changing very quickly, because while you may have a contract, we know that every contract has leak in spend, right? And that is coming from lots of people that have great online presence. And it might not even be that they're going to look to buy there, but they start getting their information from somewhere else about maybe OSHA information that they need, or maybe it's product specs, whatever it might be. If they're needing to go somewhere else versus from you as their contracted, trusted source, the opportunity for that leak on that contract to just turn into a rushing, gushing thing is out there. So I think we need to really kind of start working to continue to shift the mindset that says, I want to sell to my buyer the way he wants to buy, as opposed to how I want to sell. And what we know is, we talk about this constantly here, is, that omni-channel concept is let them consume information, get that experience, but buy from you how they want to.
Well, to me, it's 3 steps, right? Let them buy the way they want. Make sure you're harnessing that data and the intelligence that's coming from that, and then use that intelligence to further strengthen your other channels that are there. And I think that's the miss. If you you can open up the door and have omni-channel, which I think is critical, as we've talked about. But then use that data that you're gathering to understand not just who's buying, but what they're buying and in what situations, and then use that to further strengthen what you're doing through your traditional channels and through your traditional, sales teams that are there. And I think that's where the 1 + 1 + 1 = 10. You really start to get that capability. And I think, that came out pretty much loud and clear in our conversation with Brian. And I think that's going to be, again, more of what's going to, the 2023 to me be the furthering of the year of data and smart, intelligent use of data.
Right. No, I think that's a good point. I was on the phone earlier this week with a distributor in the Southeast, and they're trying to start kind of growing their e-commerce. They have an e-commerce program now, but it's nothing where they want it to be. But we started talking about that. We talk all the time, right, about siloed data within organizations. We've got e-commerce data, we've got marketing data, and then we've got ERP data, and then 1,000 spreadsheets, right, running around the organization with different information from trade shows, events, whatever it might be. And when you harness that together and feed that back to your salesperson, that's when that customer relationship, because we have intelligence about our relationship, really expands. And the idea of, a salesperson getting notified through a CRM system that they have an existing customer that abandoned a shopping cart. And, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this to you, but we're, only the middle of the month, well, not quite the middle of the month yet. And I don't think I've complimented you a couple times, but, you had built with your team some things for one of our manufacturing customers in Northern California that is phenomenal, the way you're bringing data into LeadSmart, Channel Cloud, into our product. So they're actually getting basically a live view of what's happening on their website for a salesperson. And now when that salesperson can look and say, Judy, the buyer at XYZ manufacturing plant, has been looking at these things on our website. Well, I don't sell her those things, and I've never even talked to her about that. Or she put a couple of things in a cart and abandoned the shopping cart. When that data starts flowing through, the overall view that we have of our customer becomes dramatically different. And this distributor I was talking to the other day, they hadn't even conceived of that. But the idea of giving their salesperson that kind of information was astounding to them. And the reason I kind of talk about that, we tend to not talk this much about our product, but the concept out there is, to your point, right, selling to the customer the way they want to buy, and that way that they want to buy is changing. So if how they're going to buy starts to change, why wouldn't we maximize every bit of data that we can get from that to help them with their experience, which is going to grow our sales?
Yeah, and I think it's important to you mentioned siloed data, right? Data is just that data.
Yeah.
The goal here is to take that data and turn it into analytics and insights and intelligence, right?
Yep.
So, and that's where the genius of how you use data comes together. But there's a tremendous amount of insights and analytics that can be extracted fairly easily by looking at the right data sources and then putting them together. The client you just talked about, that's what we did, is we pulled, it's not just the one website, we're pulling together data from multiple sources, using that to create analytics that then they can use to actually make decisions on where their sales team is focusing their efforts, and opportunities for other product categories, other types of things, increase wallet share basically within their existing customers. So anyway, there's a lot that can go on there, but
Before we jump ahead with that, though, I think it's interesting because it ties a little bit. Something you and I were talking about earlier this morning was, we start talking about, AI or artificial intelligence and machine learning. And, we see a lot of information, coming into wholesale distribution about using AI and so forth. And what's interesting is you brought this up to me and kind of helped me get my head around this a little bit more. And for those of you here, Tom's got a background. He's a computer scientist by training, and now he's a software guy and a distribution guy and an author and lots of other things. But your original education is computer science and understanding these things far better than a guy that barely got through business school over here. And but it's interesting because we see a lot of buzz around all of these things. But the reality of it is if that data doesn't have good integrity to it, it's not going to feed good results. But you don't need artificial intelligence to bring siloed data together to get great deep insights into what's going on with a customer. There's a lot of ways around that without trying to figure out how to go do machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, artificial intelligence is a potential byproduct of a good data strategy, right? But there's multiple layers of there's a journey that has to occur to get to the point where artificial intelligence is going to be providing more value than it is a liability. And that is the problem that we're seeing, unfortunately, quite a bit with companies jumping into artificial intelligence prematurely, is that the intelligence that they're getting is not very good because the data and the framework so it's actually misleading. So yeah, again, we could spend a whole half hour or 2 hours talking about them. Maybe we should.
We'll unpack this more down the road.
But yeah, I mean, just to summarize things really quickly, right? You have data. You have to then look at what data is relevant and what isn't. And that's one of the biggest issues is there's a lot of irrelevant data that you can throw into the mix that can actually confuse the process. So you look at relevant data, you look at how that data can be transformed into analytics, insights, and intelligence. And then you use that. And then can you build on that in the future using artificial intelligence or machine learning to take some prediction into that, right? Rather than you're trying to use that to help predict some things going forward. That's how we do it, right? So to leapfrog from data to artificial intelligence, which we do see companies talking about and doing, not is it a big mistake, but it's just not going to work because you're leapfrogging two critical, essential steps. And then you end up basically with a failed project or a lot of mess and a lot of predictions that are based on really bad knowledge, bad information.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
That's right. Good way of saying it.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I think in closing with that is the, is your team reminds me all the time, right? That this isn't what do you guys call it? Auto magic. It doesn't just happen because, I said we could do this. Of course we can build this, guys. Right. It's not auto magic. So good. Well, kind of winding this down, let's talk about what's kind of going on around.
Yeah, and I wanted to welcome Susan. Susan is a regular on some of our other podcasts and good friend of Brandon and so forth. So great to see you on our Around the Horn, Susan.
It's nice to have you with us. Thanks. You made that comment about selling and advising your customers by viewing things from their chairs. And that's right. It's there's a lot that can be done remotely these days, as we're seeing. It's nice to get back in person, but when we can accomplish a lot ahead of time, it's great. So Good stuff. So let's kind of jump ahead here. It's one of the biggest things that I love seeing, and we only have a little bit of space to talk about this in the newsletter we do each week. And but there was probably 5 to 7 significant M&A transactions since we were here last Friday that have been announced within wholesale distribution, and really even within, I'll call it industrial safety, building supply arena. It's in a narrow span. So we see that, Blackhawk Industrial, one of the largest industrial supply companies in North America, did another acquisition. We saw the prior week, Martin Industrial. There's just been a bunch of these done. And it continues. And to me, that's extremely encouraging, right? Because once in a while we see announcements about M&A activity, and it's a distressed company, and and somebody gobbled them up and helped pay their bills down, and now they've expanded their own footprint. But there's some M&A stuff that's being done out there that's of some very relevant companies that are coming together, and sometimes it's in mergers, and most often it's acquisitions. But it's nice to see that while we see the doom and gloom we talked about in the early part of things today, it's nice to see this M&A activity going through wholesale distribution. So we saw that with Blackhawk. There's quite a few others. The other thing I was going to mention there is back to our e-commerce discussion. Last week we talked about Watsco in the HVAC and refrigeration world. I think it was almost $2.5 billion of e-commerce in the previous quarter. Fastenal's hitting $1 billion with it now as well. It's phenomenal growth within e-commerce. So it's obviously something that's got to be paid attention to. And then, DXP in the industrial distribution world, jumping with big sales increase over the previous period in third quarter sales. So I love just seeing momentum continuing when we hear all the doom and gloom that we talked about in the first section that we were in today. So just makes me feel good about the market we serve, and then overall that maybe things aren't as bad as, or going to be as bad as described by the pundits.
I think continue to be a lot of M&A transactions over the next year in this industry. And I think for some of the reasons we've talked about, right? A lot of companies looking to improve their operational efficiencies, looking to improve their coverage. There's some real logical, good reasons to continue some of the acquisition and M&A process. So I think that's going to definitely continue in the next year. And I think it'll make a lot of the companies stronger and, again, more operationally more efficient and able to take advantage of technology better and all the things that we talked about there. You combine that, all the stuff we've been talking about with e-commerce. So yeah, it's anyway, a lot of interesting dynamics coming together, coming into next year. So it'll be fun to report on it.
Let's kind of wind down today with looking at our events coming up. I think I just really wanted to plug, as we do quite regularly, the Industrial Supply Association's having this big fall summit. It's going to be a really good event. We're happy to be one of the sponsors of that event. There's a 3-track arena. There's women in industry, there's emerging leaders, and then there's a whole segment in SalesWorks. And that SalesWorks session should be really good. It's being led by a couple of all-stars we're helping sponsor, and we'll be participating in that as well. I'll be in Orlando for that event later this month, beginning of December. But if you're not part of the Industrial Supply Association and you work within that arena, in that world, great event to be at, great group to support. Brendan Breen and his team do a fantastic job. But that event I'm looking forward to. I think is going to be really great. Really good speakers coming in, and just some solid networking opportunities. I know you're going to be on the East Coast that same week while I'm down in Orlando for that event, visiting some customers, which I appreciate you doing that. And we both come home and go straight to San Diego for Affiliated Distributors E-commerce and Marketing Summit. So that should be a good event as well. And then did I mention that I want you to go to World of Concrete this year and see our customers instead of me? You're a Vegas guy.
I've been to World of Concrete a couple of times before. I thought it was a great show. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I'm just not a Vegas fan, and you are. So anyways, lots of good stuff coming up. Let's wind it down. Let's thank everybody for being with us. Those of you that made some comments, we appreciate it. We'll watch each week to the hidden comments that will come in after the fact, which normally do.
And even, if you have some suggestions on topics you would like us to talk more about, if there's things in here that we've talked about that you'd like to have us unpack a bit more, let us know, and we can go in those directions. There's certainly no shortage of things to talk about. That's for sure.
Well, that's right. And those of you that know me know I'll just talk. So if you give me the opportunity, what I did want to mention is, and it's something you had asked me about recently, I want to get, I'll get this done in the next week or two. We have a slate of guests, and we always enjoy having guests with us, and want to start doing that more. We have a slate of people that have agreed to join us. There's a couple people I think that had come on today that I'm wanting to get on with us as well. So we'll probably get a calendar of guests scheduled soon, and maybe we can get that fully scheduled, and then we can publicize who we'll have coming soon, because we've probably got 8 or 10 lined up for rest of the year and first quarter that people that have asked to join us. So we'll get that going, and wish everybody a great weekend, and thanks for spending some time with us this morning.
Yep. Have a good weekend. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
Tom, we'll talk to you later today.